Hold on to your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 120 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Once again, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who is hoping Ho Howard shows up on Christmas Eve and to fill her stocking full of IPAs. I am merely a frustrating string of defective Christmas lights named Darren. Happy Howard Days, Mary. How are you?
What the hell? I thought you said we weren't going to mention Howard in this episode.
Well, we got to get him somehow. I mean, God
you were all worried I was going to start talking about it. And then Howard was at Pickett's Mill.
He was at Pickett's Mill. So what's going on? How are you? What's going on?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Mary. I'm doing just great. It's the first time we recorded just us in a while. We had Dr. Varon on with us last time, and now we're back just in the saddle again, back and doing this again. And now we're going to be having some fun as we are approaching the holidays. Everybody's in a good mood. Christmas and all the other holidays are in the air, and so we are recording again.
Well, this episode might not be. It might be kind of depressing at the end.
Well,
the guy's life is not exactly thrilling, and it doesn't end. Spoiler alert, it did not end well for him.
No, it didn't. But we will talk about him in just a moment. I'm going to be a gracious host because I don't forget to do this, and I will ask you, what by happenstance are you happening to be drinking tonight on this Friday night?
I am drinking Haze Glare IPA from New Belgian Brewing, and I'm drinking it out of my Chickamauga mug because although the general we're going to talk about, not a huge role in Chickamauga, he is still there at Chickamauga.
Okay.
Yeah, they're real exciting. What are you drinking?
Oh, I really didn't think you were asking. I'm going traditional, going Yingling here, the great nectar of Pennsylvania, and I'm drinking out of my Pee Wee Herman mug. Who, although he did not fight in the Civil War, Mary, he was the one has a Texas relation because he was the one who discovered there was a basement in the Alamo in Texas. Hence, Pee Wee Herman mug.
Nice.
So there we go.
I was going to try and find us Texas beer tonight at Total Wine, but I didn't think they would. I was like, okay. What can I get us to drink that is from Texas? And that that leads.
When I was living down there, Mary, which I did, we drank Lone Star, which was horrible beer made out of Texas, but it was Texas. But in any case, so speaking of Texas, we are going to be talking specifically Texan. We're going to be talking about the Confederate General Hiram Granbury. Mm-hmm. Now, to most, he is not a household name like a Lee nor a Grant, but his story is really one that epitomizes really many, on both sides who fought and died without a lot of notoriety. Now, Granbury was a man who most of the time people considered a real strong leader, mm-hmm. and he died that tragic death in the late stage of the war at the Battle of Franklin, in which we've said many times, in hindsight, is probably a kind of a waste of life.
Yeah.
And he's a guy like a lot of them. He didn't attend West Point, nor did he have really any military training, but due to that natural leadership ability, he's going to rise through the ranks and he's going to earn the reputation of being one of the best young fighters in the war on either side. So he's another guy. I don't want to say he's nameless or someone who is kind of on that level, but he's somebody who I think when you kind of dig deep and start to go deep into these rabbit holes, there are a lot of Hiram Granburys out there, but his story is so personal and so tragic that I think it's one that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, as I knew going into this how sad his story, it is, honestly, it's a sad story. It's an interesting one though. But as you said, he's a really great leader. And that could come from the fact that he's really tall for his time. Some sources say he was 6'2", some say he was 6'5", and he had a very deep voice that was so he was able to project his voice, and he just came across as a leader. And when he was at Oakland College, which is a Presbyterian college near Rodney, Mississippi, where he started going to school, his professors and fellow students said that, they would remark, wow, this guy's a natural leader. He's incredibly intelligent. He's a very good writer. He's considered to be a scholar. And he's just one of these guys that, as you said, he doesn't go to West Point, just like John Brown Gordon doesn't go to West Point, but he comes out of this, he gets a reputation for being a really hard fighter, even in battles that do not go well for the Confederacy, as we're going to learn.
No, and again, in his comparison to John Brown Gordon's an interesting one. There are a lot of parallels. So let's jump into this guy. Hiram Bronson Granbury, Mary, is born on March 1st of 1831 in Copiah County, Mississippi. He was the son of Norville and Nancy Granbury, and we'll talk about that. Norville was a Baptist minister. He was also a slave-owning farmer,
Hmm.
right? And when Hiram was about 4 years old, give or take, the family's going to move to Hinds County, which is not far from the town of Raymond, which you just mentioned in Mississippi, where later on in life, he'll be familiar with that part of the country
Yeah.
as well. Now, he attended Presbyterian College first, but then in 1850, he's going to end up going and graduating from the prestigious Oakland College, Mary, which is
Mm.
right on the river town of Rodney, Mississippi. Oakland College, just by the by, it folds in 1870, goes under. And that ground that the college was on is actually on the historically Black campus today of Alcorn State, if you know
Mm.
Alcorn State University, which generated such NFL alums such as Steve McNair, also Leslie Frazier. So it's interesting that it's got a little parallel, especially the all-Black college.
Yeah.
1850 also is going to hit Granbury with a bunch of personal tragedies as well. He's going to lose both of his parents to tuberculosis within about a 5-month period, as well as the death of two of his sisters, Jemima and Catherine.
Mm.
Both were in their early 20s and both were newlyweds. So it's going to leave him with 3 siblings left. And not, it doesn't come into the story, but he loses a lot of his family.
Yeah.
Around age 21, Granbury is going to move to Texas, and he's going to change the spelling of his last name from Grandbury to Granbury, Granbury. And the thing about it, there's no real record of why. There's some speculation that he already had an uncle in Texas named
Yeah.
Grandbury and wanted to separate. But there's also speculation that he was tired of people misspelling his name. So he changed it to the phonetic spelling of Granbury. As a guy, I'll tell you point blank, I can relate because 99% of people spell my first name wrong.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand that concept.
Yeah.
And Granbury, one of Granbury's surviving sisters, is the only one who actually writes about it. And she's going to basically say that in her memoirs that his name change was a whim and did it for no particular reason.
Yeah, he
So
did it
there's
when
some-
he was she said her name was Naughty, and she said he did it when he was a teenager, so it was one of those kind of like, I wondered when I read that about her, I was like, was this some kind of act of rebellion of his? Did he have kind of not a great relationship with his parents where he was like, I just want to whatever, or did he not just was he lazy and didn't feel like putting in as many letters?
It's tough to say, but he's going to move to a town called Seguin, Texas, which is just east of San Antonio, if you know the area. He's going to purchase a plot of land at the corner of Austin and West Court Street, where he's going to set up shop to become a lawyer. Now, unfortunately for Granbury, his first foray into practicing law was about as successful as a new attempt dry January, so it did not work whatsoever. But by all accounts, though, he did enjoy Texas. And he says, Granbury of Texas, nowhere is a worthy stranger made more welcome than here in Texas. So he was definitely loved being in Texas.
Yeah, it sounds like
Now-
he made his home there. That was one thing that I kind of picked up on, is he's one of these guys that is not necessarily born in the state, but he finds his home there, and that's got a parallel with Claiborne. Now, Claiborne is an immigrant, but he finds his home in the South as well, in Arkansas. So I saw a parallel there. These are two guys, and Claiborne and Granbury are going to become good friends. Two guys that found their home in the place where they weren't born.
Yeah. And, when I was living down there, you used to always say, you could always tell a Texan, but you can't tell them anything. That's what we used to say all the time about Texas.
Did they
right?
all have like crazy wild hair like Granbury?
I don't know. He may have, but he did. He did get his law degree at Baylor University, at law school. He did pass the bar, but he obviously still needed a little bit of practice. So in 1852, Granbury is going to move to McLennan County, which is in central Texas, near the town of Waco, and he's going to join Waco's Masonic Lodge number 92, and that's going to be a big part of his life. I'll talk about that later. Waco, of course, Mary, is the home of Dr. Pepper. I don't know if you know this, but it's invented by Charles Alderton in 1880.
That is like my favorite soft drink, is Dr. Pepper.
It's the weirdest drink you drink on Saturday mornings when you can't get out of bed. It's the weirdest thing how you drink that. I don't know how that
I've
works.
been into Dr. Pepper since I was like 6 years old. It's my favorite soft drink.
I can't imagine why. But actually, the thing about it, when I was living down there used to be a Dr. Pepper museum. You could actually go visit outside of. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a. So who maybe there still is. So,
So
but
his
anyway,
role in the lodge is he? I read somewhere he's like a secretary. Is that one of the things that he does there?
yeah. He's going to be the secretary initially. He's going to climb through the ranks, but he's going to be the secretary, which is basically it's the same thing as any organization. He just take notes and reads them and all that. But anyway, as bad as his law practice was in Seguin, once he got to McLennan County, it really boomed.
Mm-hmm.
And by the age of 25, Hiram Granbury is elected Chief Justice of McLennan County, where he's going to serve from 1856 to 1858. And was also elected, like you said, Secretary of Masonic Lodge. So his life, kind of like a Patrick Claiborne in
Yeah.
Arkansas, is taken off, right off the bat. Now he's going to quickly have the reputation in town of being a gifted scholar in the area. He's also going to write for Waco's first newspaper called the Brazos Statesman. He's going to write for that.
I
So
almost
he
said
can,
like the Brazo. That sounds like I'm not gonna say
okay, but he's going to be
Brazo.
he's going to be a learned man in Central Texas who can read, who can write, who's very eloquent.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who's going to be very attractive. Now, he's like you said, he's tall, he's handsome, he's got dark hair. He quickly rose to become one of the elite in Waco and McLennan County. And this is all by the age of 25 years old. This is happening, right? A local preacher named John Hutchinson described Granbury as a man of classic taste, a commanding form, and a trumpet voice. That's how they described him,
Wow.
kind of like we were saying a little bit earlier, right? And it was around this time when Hiram is going to meet a woman 7 years his younger named Fanny Sims. And they quickly became hot and heavy, as they say, right? But the thing is, thing about Fanny, she was then and still is a mystery.
Yeah.
She's what is it? So she's born in Alabama. Her family still lives in the Tuscaloosa area, right? Go Bama, by the way, football on that one, right? But no one really knows how or why Fanny ended up in Texas. She just kind of appeared there, and her family stayed there. And she's only 20 years old with no family, and finds herself in Waco. And there's also no known photography, no pictures of her,
No,
no
I've
photographs of
been
her.
looking around for pictures of her because I know like she's described as being like small, which I guess if your husband or future husband Granbury is 6'2", of course she's probably going to be small. So, but apparently I've got one story I'm going to tell about her in a little while that she's feisty, she's strong, despite health problems that she has. She's and the two of them are very, very close, and they become close very, very quickly.
Right. March 31st, 1858, they are going to get married in Waco. And again, she's just 20 years old at the time. And the thing about the Granberries is they had no children. And it's possibly due to a medical condition that we're going to talk about in a little while, why they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have children. But we'll get to that here in a little bit. Granbury is also going to get involved in the local militia around this time. And by 1860, he will be serving as a lieutenant with the Texas Rangers, not the baseball team, Mary, the militia group, right? And so he's going to be rising now. This is going to be his military education. Like in many parts of the South, Texas was in the midst of that secession crisis, right? And just after 11 o'clock in the morning on February 1st, 1861, and despite the pleas of its 67-year-old governor, Sam Houston, Texas is going to overwhelmingly vote to secede and become the seventh state to leave the Union for the Confederacy, right? So Granbury, much like the guy we mentioned a little bit ago, John Brown Gordon, he's that natural leader and that prominent local individual. He's going to begin to recruit and raise a company of 100 Waco men, which is the standard number for a company, and he's going to fight for a group called the Waco Guards. And just like the Raccoon Russell Gordon, the parallels,
I love the names.
lawyers, almost exactly the same. So despite no military education nor any real military background, which wasn't that unusual at the time, obviously,
No.
Hiram Granbury is going to become captain of the Waco Guards heading into the secession crisis. And, and just like you said a while ago, just imagine he stood out. He was tall, he was between 6'2" and 6'5", depending on who you read. Like you said before, he was thin though. He only weighed about 160 pounds.
Yeah.
He had that black wavy hair. Like he looked like that kid who always forgot to wear his comb, bring the comb on picture day at first grade. His hair is just wavy all over the place. But on October 2nd of 1861, Granbury and his Waco guards are going to find themselves in the town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Mary, and they're going to join 9 other companies to create the 7th Texas Infantry under the command of a district judge from Fairfield, Texas, named John Gregg.
Yes, and
So
who's
this is
with them is Fanny. Fanny goes
right.
with her husband, just like John Brown Gordon's wife went with him. Fanny Granbury is with her husband while he's at war.
She's going to follow him. Now, because of these leadership abilities and the way he stood out, Granbury is going to be elected to become the regiment's major, third in charge now on the pecking order. And it just kind of showed how highly that Granbury was thought of among his men. The 7th Texas over these next couple of years will become one of Texas's best and most fighting regiments in the Civil War. We'll talk about that. So Hiram, he's set off for Kentucky with his in the army with his wife Fanny. She's refusing to go. She's going to stay. She's not going to stay behind in Waco. Yeah. She's going to follow him along, and basically wherever she's going to stay in local hotels, anywhere close to the Confederate camp, she's going to try to stay because she wants to be near Hiram. Yeah. Right? Makes sense.
Yep.
And there's no record of what Hiram thought of that, admittedly, but
I'm going to guess, judging by their relationship, that he was okay with it the same way that Gordon was okay with his wife being there too. Like, I think they just, they were companions, and, Fanny just was like, well, whatever. They hadn't been married for that long either. I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. But on February 9th of 1862, the 7th Texas is going to march through Clarksville, Tennessee, and by the 13th are going to find themselves at Fort Donelson, and were part of Thomas Davidson's 2nd Brigade and Gordian Pillow's left wing of the Confederate Army of Central Kentucky. We know what's going. We're not going to go into history of that, but we kind of know what's going to happen.
We've done an episode about this.
Basically, suffice it to say, awful rebel leadership by unqualified generals. John Floyd, Pillow, Simon Bolivar Buckner, they're going to cause the Rebs to basically be routed by U.S. Grant in that famous unconditional surrender proxy and demand the surrender of the fort on February 16th of 1862. Now, the 7th Texas is going to be one of the many regiments that are going to be bagged and captured by the Union, including their major Hiram Granbury.
Yeah.
Right? So many of the enlisted men, where they were captured, they were sent to the brand new Johnson's Island prison camp, Mary, which opened in April of 1862 in Sandusky, Ohio.
Yep.
I imagine many of the captives were being forced to make Callahan auto parts, Mary. Obviously, never some movie Tommy Boy, but it's okay.
No,
that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Been to Cedar Point, though, which is right across the bay.
Never mind. You missed that joke. In any case, but while the enlisted men were sent, were on their way to Johnson's Island, the officers were spared the ungodly misery of going to Ohio and were sent to Fort Warren in Boston Harbor. Now, the Confederates the officers were surprised at the humane treatment they received in Boston. And this is the thing about Fort Warren, there were 4 or 5 men in each chamber. Each was heated with a coal-burning stove. Every prisoner got an iron cot with a mattress and blanket. It's basically, and the quality of the food kind of depended on how much money you had, how rich you were, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
they were able to buy stuff. And they said, like, I found some quotes from Greg, because Greg was going there with Granbury, and who else is with them is Fanny. Fanny's like, I'm going with you. If you're going to prison, I'm coming with you. Yeah. And they basically travel from Chicago. They go through Cleveland. They go through Buffalo in order to get to Boston. And Greg said they had, like, there was crowds of Yankees everywhere. That he said we found crowds of Yankees. They were curious at every town. They gave us hard and half cooked meat. Hard words were to be heard at our receptions, but there were many everywhere who disposed to argue the question with us, and they talked kindly enough. Now they came to a point where they had to cross the Hudson. And this is what McGavick or Colonel Randall McGavick is another officer that is traveling with them. And he said, Major Granbury of Texas had his wife traveling with him, a small and delicate woman, but she waded through the shock of ice on the ice like a heroine and seemed determined to cling to the fortunes of her husband. So here's this small and delicate woman, and she's wading through icy water. She's going over ice with her husband and these guys, and
Yeah.
it sounds like, this guy's saying she's a heroine for doing this. Like, so she's clearly respected. She's not one of these like, oh, geez, he brought his wife along. And this guy's like, holy shit, this woman is like, she's bad. Like, basically, she's a badass for doing this. And I really
No.
I love that story of her, what she's having to do. And she unfortunately can't be in Fort Warren with
No.
Granbury.
No, but I mean, speaking of McGavick, Randall McGavick, he's a rich planter from Nashville. He's one of the richest men in the Confederacy to fight. He's not Wade Hampton rich,
Yeah.
but he's pretty rich. He has a quote about Fort Warren where he says, "I ate so well, you would think I was in a first class hotel in Boston. That's how much they took care of him."
Yeah.
So also speaking of Fort Warren, these officers they were given alcohol of all things.
Yeah.
Daily newspapers. They got DQ gift certificates while they were there.
They
They were
played
allowed,
chess. They played
right, but
football.
they were allowed to receive gifts from the outside, including books and food. I mean, I mean, they were taken care of. Now, the thing about it though, Fort Donelson was the first real mass capture of the
Yeah.
Civil War. So I imagine the Union brass kind of didn't know how to deal with captives in the situation. So, but they took care of these officers and treated them very, very well. Fort Warren, by the way, it's just to give an idea if you haven't been here, it's 28 acres of a prison that was built on George's Island in Boston Harbor. It's about 6 miles out and away from the city. During the Civil War, it was home to such Confederate generals such as Isaac Trimble, Simon Bolivar, Richard Ewell, as well as Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens. It's also where John Brown's Body, the song, was written.
Yeah.
It was also the inspiration, Mary, of Leonardo DiCaprio's Shutter Island movie.
Yes.
That's where it takes place in that movie as well. But the thing, like you said before, when Hiram's going to Boston, Fanny is also going to ship up to Boston too.
Yeah.
She's going to make sure that she's with him. And what's interesting about this, though, when U.S. Grant, who bagged them all, Fort Donelson, when he hears that Fanny is going with them and going across the Hudson like she's doing, he is going to personally find her an apartment in the city of Boston to stay in. He's going to find it. Even back then, it was impossible to find a damn place in the city. But Grant actually did. And also, he made sure that while she was getting settled, that Hiram was temporarily paroled and released to be with her to make sure she was settled in the city, with a promise that when she got all situated to go back to the island, which of course he did.
Yeah.
I mean, no word if Fanny's moving truck got stuck on the Star Road Drive under a bridge. I mean, if you know the area, you know what I mean by that. But he helped. This just kind of goes to show how they took care of them. They made sure it was, and for the most part, Fanny's there. It's cold. They're from the South, and she's going to start to get sick. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And she's going to start writing letters to her husband in Fort Warren. Don't forget, they can receive mail.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the story kind of takes a turn for Granbury. His cellmate in Boston was a political prisoner from Hagerstown, Maryland. His name was Charles McGill. He was a doctor. He was also the co-founder of the Hagerstown Herald, as well as a general in the Confederate militia in Maryland. McGill was arrested at his home in Hagerstown on September 30th of 1861 for pro-Confederate activities, whatever the hell that means. And he's going to be sent to Fort Warren as a political prisoner. Now, McGill, he also, he was a doctor, and he took great interest in Fanny's letters because Hiram would read him the letters. And McGill, being a doctor, is trying to figure out what the heck's wrong with her, because and at first they thought that it was just the climate. She's up here in the north, it's cold. But then he started thinking it maybe it wasn't, and he feared that what she had, what will be known today as ovarian cancer. And he urged Hiram to send Fanny from Boston to his family's home in Hagerstown to stay with them. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is Fanny's plight became the primary subject of Charles's letters home. On March 7th of 1862, McGill is going to write, "Major Granbury of Texas is rooming with us. How I felt for him when he informed me of his lady, but 20 years old, had followed him. She will leave Boston tomorrow morning and will arrive in Hagerstown, Maryland." So he convinced her to go back. A few months later, on June 27th, he writes, I feel very sure she is suffering from ovarian enlargement of a dropsy in character. The major, Granbury, has just received a letter from his lady, and I am pleased to say that she has very much improved.
Mm.
Okay, so
Yep.
who knows? Soon, though, Fanny's condition is going to get worse, and Charles McGill, the doctor, is going to beg his wife, you got to convince Fanny to go get examined because she was refusing to get
I think
examined.
she was in that regard. I mean, and men or women can relate to this. I think she was kind of like, no, there's nothing wrong, and probably feeling like, I don't want to be a bother. I'm staying at someone else's house. My husband's in prison, like in a prison camp. I don't want to be a bother, you know.
He's going to keep writing July 15th now. I wish you'd have a talk with Mrs. Granbury and insist on her submitting to an examination. It is impossible to arrive at the true nature of her disease without this. So McGill, by the way, he's an interesting fellow, Charles McGill.
Mm-hmm.
His son, Charles G.W. McGill, was also a doctor in Stonewall's brigade. In July of 1863, Charles, who was released at that point from Boston, and his son both set up a hospital in Hagerstown, Maryland, to deal with the Confederates after the Battle of Gettysburg, right? They both accompanied Lee's army on the retreat back to Virginia and remained surgeons in the Confederate Army for the rest of the war. So
Wow.
that's who they were, right? Anyways, finally, in August of 1862, Fanny is going to agree to an examination in the city of Baltimore, and it was scheduled, and she was scheduled to be operated on.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. When the Union government found out everything that's going on with this, right, they granted Granbury special parole so he can go to Baltimore to be with Fanny for the surgery. So in August of 1862, Granbury is going to leave Fort Warren, and it's going to turn out to be for good.
And that's thanks to Justin Dimmock, who is the
right.
He's the commandant, well, the commander there. And he's interesting thing about Dimmock is he's known for his humane and compassionate treatment of the Confederates at Fort Warren. He had been deemed too old for field service because he was born in 1800. So he's in his 60s at the time. But his son is going to be killed, or was killed, at the Battle of Chancellorsville.
Yeah. But it goes to show that in this situation that that they exchanged him. August 27th, 1862, Hiram Granbury is going to be exchanged and released. In case you're curious, they got him for 2 Union lieutenants. That was a trade. Okay.
So like baseball cards.
Keeping track, right?
It's like baseball cards.
Yeah. But by the time he gets to Baltimore, the doctors chose not to do the operation, and it was determined that her cancer was too far developed, and there was nothing they could do for her. And so they just basically, try to make her comfortable. And the thing what's tough about it was Granbury was exchanged, but he wasn't released. He still had a job to do with the Army. And despite the fact that the 7th Texas was still in Josh's Island, they would not be exchanged until later in that fall. Granbury, while this is all going on, is going to be promoted to colonel on August 29th. So, and here's the thing too, is so he has to leave. He's going to have to leave his wife again. Now, before leaving Baltimore for his return to the Army, Granbury is going to stop at a place called Bendan's Gallery, a top-end photo studio in the city, for a pose for a photograph of himself to give to Fanny. Now, this was going to be and he had to know this will be the last time he was ever going to see her. So he wanted to make sure that when the end came, that she had a photo of him, because he knew he couldn't be there with her. And the thing about it, though, is this photo is that popular photo you see with the messy hair.
Oh, is
that everyone is? And right, we have fun with it. But the thing about it, though, if you look at the picture closely and you look at his eyes, you can see the sadness. And this was probably the saddest part of his life. So look at that picture. And when that picture was taken, he was making that picture to give to his wife, who was dying. He knew he would never see again, because he knew that she wanted to have that picture. So when she died, she'd have it.
Yeah.
That's the history of that picture, which is really, really sad. And, Granbury, he's going to be a colonel, but he's going to have no command. He's going to kind of bounce around a little bit in title only. Eventually, they're going to make him colonel of his old regiment, the 7th Texas. because you know why? Because John Gregg's still in prison. He's
Yep.
still in
Yeah,
jail.
he's still there.
So
He
he's still
rejoined
in
us.
Boston.
He rejoins them on March the 1st,
Right.
1863, which is his 32nd birthday.
Right.
And on March 3rd, they actually have a birthday party for him. And I mean, I can't imagine it's probably pretty bittersweet for him because he's not with his wife. But they had a cake, they had preserves and jelly, and they had sausages, biscuits, and coffee. And like, you know, and I don't know if they did that because they probably knew his situation. So it's like, well, let's try and cheer the poor guy up kind of thing. But still, that must have been really bittersweet for him to, it's like, wow, it's my 32nd birthday and my wife is like,
Yeah.
she's dying of cancer,
By the end, so early 1863, Fanny's health is going to get worse, and she's going to end up leaving Maryland and going back to her family's home in Alabama. I mentioned her family was in the Tuscaloosa
He
area,
takes her back there. I think at some,
right?
there's one story where he takes her back there.
See, I heard he didn't take her back there.
Yeah.
That he did.
There's so many different stories about it.
But who knows? So it doesn't matter. But in any case, she's going to go to Alabama to live her last days with her family on March 20th, 1863, just 11 days before Fanny and Hiram are going to have their 5th anniversary. She's going to die of ovarian cancer. And as you can imagine, Hiram was absolutely devastated. It ruined the whole spring. It just affected him. His regiment was back on the field by that spring, though, because I don't know if you know this, Mary, U.S. Grant was beginning his Vicksburg campaign again on March 29th of 1863, which is going to run until July 4th, right? So when Grant is going to land at Bruinsburg in late April, he's going to begin to move through Mississippi towards Jackson, Mississippi. He's going to plan to take that city, and he's going to move to Vicksburg. He's going to take the city from the Savannah. We talked all about the whole campaign, right? But John Gregg, at this point, he's back.
Yeah.
Okay. He got himself out, but he's now a brigadier general under James Pemberton, right? And he'll be back from Jackson. And he's going to go to. He's basically going to be sent from Jackson, Mississippi. This is Gregg now, the brigade, to Raymond, Mississippi, to intercept what he thinks is a small Union advancing force towards Raymond, right? Before they're all going all over the place trying to take different places. Gregg's brigade, including Granbury 7th Texas, has about 4,000 men. And to their surprise, that small Union force advancing towards Richmond, guess what? It's James Burbsy McPherson's 10,000 man 17th Corps. Oops.
Yep.
And this is going to result in the Battle of Raymond on May 12th of 1863. I think we did an episode
we
on
did.
that, I think.
This is check out our episode on the Battle of
Raymond.
Yeah.
we did. So check that out. But I mean, here though, Granbury in his 7th Texas, the plan was to hit the head of the Union column and hold them, grab them by the nose and hold them until the rest of the Confederates could come, right?
Yep.
And but by then they realized that the brigade was significantly outmanned. But thanks to some weird overcautious action by McPherson, the Rebs were able to fall back and only lose about 500 guys, even though it was. But that 7th Texas, Mary, was right in the middle, fighting hard along that 14-mile creek, that place they called, which is about 6 or so miles away at this moment from where Granbury grew up in Hinds County, Mississippi, Hinds City, rather. Yeah. So it's kind of old home coming back, right? And basically, 2 days later, the Battle of Jackson, another retreat, by the way, is going to be the end of Grant's Vicksburg campaign as far as he's concerned. As Joseph E. Johnston is going to withdraw east, where his 32,000-man army of relief was stationed, which provided no relief whatsoever. Because if you remember, he basically, by the time this 32,000-man army reached the Big Black River on July 3rd, the shoot match was over, and it was too late to do anything. So basically, they fell back. So there wasn't a lot of action for the 7th Texas with these guys here.
But whenever they did fight, like Granbury was noted to be, like, they were very hard fighting guys because he was very, after his wife died, the one thing that was said about him is he had one thing left to do in life, and that was basically he put everything into that regiment and his men and the war, and that's because that's what Fanny apparently would have wanted, was that just for him to put everything into it, and that's what he did.
But the one concept of Granbury is he was always under incompetent leadership. He just
Yes.
was, right? So after the Vicksburg fiasco, Granbury and his 7 Texas are going to be transferred to the land of the misfit toys, Mary, the Army of Tennessee under
Yep.
Braxton Bragg. They're going to be transferred, but they're going to be joined by the 6 and 10 Texas, the 15 Texas Cavalry, as well as the 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th Texas Cavalry to form what's going to be that famous Texas Brigade under the great James Argyle Smith, Mary,
Yep.
right? That's who he's going to be. Now, this Texas Brigade is going to be placed in the division with some guy named Patrick Claiborne. I don't know if you've heard of him, okay? And he's going to be in John C. Breckinridge's Second Corps of the Army of Tennessee, where from September 18th to the 20th, they're going to participate in the Battle of Chickamauga. But they weren't a big part of it. But the
Granbury
thing
is
about
wounded in the I think he gets shot in the belly or something in this battle, and he's wounded there.
right, but as far as the whole thing, they're
Yeah.
going to Chattanooga is where they're going to kind of
Yeah.
make their claim, okay? And so for the most part, we're not going to talk about these deep battles in detail. Battle of Chattanooga, November 25th at Missionary Ridge. This is where Granbury's guys, they're going to be in that far right of the right flank of the Confederates. And really, this is the first time when I think he can look up to a general and say, this guy knows what he's doing in Claiborne.
Yeah.
Because despite the fact that the Army of Tennessee got routed at Chattanooga, Claiborne's line never broke.
No.
They held, and for the most part, they did very, very well all by reports, right? And the thing about it, though, is the thing that did not go good for the Texas Brigade worked out really well for Hiram Granbury because James Argyle Smith is going to be shot and injured.
Yeah.
And this is when Hiram Granbury is going to be promoted to Brigadier General of the Texas Brigade, which will be known for the rest of the war, even after Granbury's death, as Granbury's Texas Brigade.
Yeah.
This is where the whole legend kind of begins with this now, right? He's going to join fellow brigadier generals, Daniel Govan, Lucius Polk, and Mark Lowry, and they're going to form a ball-busting, hard-lining all-star team for Patrick Claiborne.
Yeah, these are kind of like the steel of the Confederacy. And, they're, going forward, they're at many different battles where they are just absolute, like, basically you wouldn't want to go up against them. Like when the guys from the Union saw that flag with the, it's the some call it the Hardy flag, some call it the flag of Claiborne's division. Like they knew what they were up against, and it was these guys, including Granbury.
They were, and when the calendar flips to 1864, the Atlanta campaign is going to dominate most of the year for Army of Tennessee, right? William T. Sherman, Mary, I don't know if you've heard of him or not.
Uncle
He's going to do
Blingy.
that Uncle Bill, the 100-mile campaign from Chattanooga to Atlanta is going to lead to several battles versus Joseph E. Johnson's Army of Tennessee. And the thing about it, though, is, in these battles, specifically the Battle of Pickett's Mill, Granbury's brigade really stood out, and their presence really took on a cult of personality, due to the reputation of being those hard fighters.
Yes, yeah, they did. And Pickett's Mill is we did an episode about it. Howard in his memoirs said that it was an absolute nightmare. That's the way he described it. It's horrific fighting. And obviously Granbury, even though he was on the winning side in this battle, he sees some pretty horrible stuff too. And the battle is fought, Pickett's Mill is fought in late May of 1864. In June of 1864, Granbury is in a hospital in Atlanta for, I couldn't find what the illness was, but the one resource I was reading about it said that today he probably would have been diagnosed with what today is called clinical depression, that he had kind of just reached that point where he was in the hospital for a month and he takes a leave from his regiment for this, and he's in Atlanta. And you have to remember all that he's been through in over a year, right? Like he's lost his wife, and that has really, really, like, she was his companion. I would say, she was his best friend. They clearly loved each other very much, and they didn't get that many years together. But, the way she died is terrible. She's 25 years old when she dies. But also just before Pickett's Mill, he had learned of the death of his brother in Louisiana. Obviously, as I said, still mourning his wife. The stress from campaigning. The Atlanta campaign has been a horrific campaign. Pickett's Mill is a terribly horrific battle as well, even if you are on the Confederate side, which won the battle. He also had a slight head wound at Pickett's Mill, so he might have been suffering from a concussion as well. And he's, as I said, treated at an Atlanta hospital, and he comes back in July. And one of his men wrote, General Granbury is in camp today. He has been quite sick, but he says he can take command in 8 or 10 days. And the guy that they had commanding him, General Smith, they didn't like him and said he's a brave man, but he's mean as a hyena. And we're going to be glad to get Granbury back. And they apparently petitioned to have Granbury brought back. Like, this is, you know, and this is a time when the army is starting to they're starting to lose steam. They're starting to lose their morale. But the thing with Granbury and also the thing with Claiborne is there was something about them, their leadership abilities, whatever, that the men were able to keep their morale. They were able to keep inspiring their men. And that's how much these guys were like, we want you back. We want this guy to be our leader. And Granbury comes back in July from his stay in the hospital. As I said, would probably, could quite possibly be diagnosed today as clinical depression.
Well, I mean, he's young and he's dealing with a lot of stuff.
He's got a lot of shit going on. Not that anybody else did, but there's a lot going on, and he's still in mourning. I don't think he ever got over the death of his wife. I think that rocked him like so hard. And back then, it's like, what are you gonna do? And I think his men knew too. Like, he was not the same person when he came back after Fanny had died.
No, but he did come back, and everyone knows what happened on September 1st, Mary. This is when Atlanta's going to fall, and John Bell Hood is now in command of the Army of Tennessee for the Confederates. Now, we talk a lot about this, and I mean, a lot of people feel that Hood was very much over his skis in this role,
and
right?
That's how it was felt in the Army too, that it was not... Right. The guys were not happy about it. But for, the one thing that kept these guys going, like Granbury's guys and Claiborne's guys, was who they had as their leader. That it's like, okay, we have Hood, but at least we've still got,
Yeah, and it's tough to say. I mean, a lot of these guys probably thought that Hood should not have been the commander of the Army of Tennessee. He probably should be managing the Jonesboro DQ instead. That's probably what he's probably better off doing. But
I think I probably would have fired him.
well, but I mean, but that's all debated. That's for conversation for other people. But this is where the Army of Tennessee was really in the fall of 1864. Atlanta's going to fall. Really, it was the last gasp for Southern independence. Really think about it. Since the fall of Atlanta basically virtually locked in Abraham Lincoln's re-election campaign of 1864. And really, the whole hopes kind of fell with it. That being said, though, Hood, he wants to keep fighting.
Yeah.
He wants to maintain being aggressive because that's who he is. Now, some say his actions were desperation. I mean, I think basically he wanted to maintain the initiative. It not be passive like his predecessor Johnston was.
Well, that's what Jefferson Davis wanted that as well. I think he was like, and as a politician, he's like, we have to keep going. And the politicians, this happened to Abraham Lincoln as well. The politicians aren't always completely 100% in tune with what is going on in the battlefield, nor are they understanding of that. And I think that was the case with Davis, that he's just like, let's just keep going.
Exactly. Well, they didn't know that it was over, but Hood wants to threaten Sherman's supply lines, but it's not really working. So he kind of decides to be bold, and late in the game, and he really tries to almost throw like a Hail Mary, and he ain't Doug Flutie, Mary. He ain't going to connect on that Hail Mary. That's just the way it is, guys. Not for nothing, and this kind of goes into the next phase of this, which is going to be the final phase, the final chapter of Granbury. This 30,000-man Union Army of the Ohio under John Schofield is marching up to link with George Thomas's Army of the Cumberland in Nashville, Tennessee. And Hood wants to destroy Schofield before he can get there and then finish off Thomas in Nashville. And so Hood really, it's a pretty bold plan. Hood is going to march his Army of Tennessee through central Alabama with Nashville in his sights, which was the Union supply hub at the time. Now, we're not going to talk about the whole thing, but it's Spring Hill, Tennessee. Hood's army missed out on a plan to really trap Schofield. Again, we did that previous episode on Spring Hill. I know we did that one. I remember doing that one.
Yeah, we did
Franklin. So check it out. But suffice it to say, again, what happened and whose fault it was is controversial. It's he said, she said. We're not going to get into that. But the thing about it is, if Hood bags Schofield there, it really doesn't change anything in the big picture because it's all window dressing. And the failure at Spring Hill is overblown. And also the thing about that, though, is blaming Hood 100% for Spring Hill is really a disservice to Schofield,
Yeah,
who really should get more credit for getting past Hood than Hood
absolutely.
let him get by. I mean, sometimes the mouse getting by the cat deserves the credit,
Yep,
right? Not
I
the
would agree.
cat falling asleep. Just saying. But the one thing that is true was that Hood was pissed off at the failure at Spring Hill. And whether it was the fault of Hood, it was the fault of Benjamin Cheatham, Patrick Claiborne, Rosewood's clown. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. Okay, it's debated to this day,
Yeah,
and that's what's going to happen after Spring Hill. And there's going to be some
yeah,
blame game stuff rather that's going to involve Granbury.
yeah. And that's the thing is like we don't know what was said. We don't know 100% who was blamed in that meeting after Spring Hill. There are reports that say that Hood outright blamed, Cheatham, Brown, and Claiborne for it. There's stories that Granbury's name came up as well. There is a story that Hood called them cowards. We don't 100% know because there are so many different stories. And that's the thing with studying this. That's the thing with studying this history is these accounts are all from people who were there, but they're all different. Um, and Granbury is going to go march towards Franklin, and he's going to be described by his men as being very agitated, being very angry. Claiborne is the same way as well. And whether they were called cowards, we will never know. But if they were, this would explain the anger that they had. This would be, and even if they are being blamed, of course they're going to be angry. And of course, men like Claiborne and Granbury are going to think, my men don't deserve this. You know, like there's just, but like the story of Spring Hill and Franklin is really interesting from like a historical memory perspective because there, as you said, there's so much blame game going on. And when they get to Franklin, when Granbury's men are told to line up by that Winstead Hill, they take one look at it and they look across to the Union line and I think they knew like
Well, I mean, I think
there's no way we
no,
can
but
do
for
this.
whatever reason, it reminds me a little bit of and people talk about Franklin. They mistakenly call it Pickett's Charge of the West. That's
So
just
much worse
right,
than
but,
Pickett's
right.
Charge.
But the thing about the Hood's on Winstead Hill and he's looking at the Union line. Right
Yep.
now, let's set the stage real quick. What they have, okay? Schofield, Hood's going to march that army 13 miles north from Spring Hill to
Yep.
Franklin, right? And Schofield, for the most part, is dug in a defensive position in Franklin, Tennessee, and he's benefited by some breastworks and entrenchments that were there previously. So they have a ready-made defense.
Yep.
So the question is, why didn't Schofield just keep going? And it's because the bridge that crossed over the Harpeth River was down and they needed to have engineers fix the bridge so they can go across. In the meantime, they had to set up a defense to get ready for the oncoming Army of Tennessee. The Battle of Franklin happens because the bridge is down, and that's kind of what happens
Yep.
with it. But the stage is set though for this bloodletting that'll be the Battle of Franklin, and Granbury's Texans are going to find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep.
But from Winstead Hill though, Hood sees that open field of about a mile or two, leading to the Union lines. And he's going to decide for whatever reason, this talk that he thought maybe the Union was weak in the middle, that's why he hit there.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, he felt that to attack the Union position across that open field was a good idea. History is going to say it was a bad idea. Jeans commercial, right?
I would
But going
agree.
forward, but that's what it was though.
Yep.
Obviously, but the thing about it, not to defend Hood, but obviously Hood felt for whatever reason the Union line was vulnerable.
Yep.
He's not stupid. I mean, he's aggressive, but he's not stupid. If he's not going to attack knowing he's going to get beat, he's going to attack because he thinks he can win, and that's why he does it. So, but for the most part, through that field, okay, it's large, but most of that he has to go. Most of the bloodshed is going to take place around 500 yards to the Union line.
Yep.
It's going to be close hand-to-hand fighting, and for the most part, Hood is his motivation to make the attack, like we said, is up. It's up for debate. People say it back and forth, but by his supporters and his detractors alike. Now, Claiborne's division, which is going to have the Texas Brigade and Granbury, is going to be basically right in the middle. They're going to attack right up the Columbia Pike,
Yeah.
right? They're right on. Okay, Granbury's brigade is going to be in the middle of that division, and they're going to get right up to the Union line. We're going to talk about the details of the battle, but Granbury, he's going to sprint ahead, and he's going to yell to his men, what?
It's going to say, "Forward, men. Never let it be said that Texans lag in a fight."
And that you can dissect that line a million different
Oh
ways,
yeah.
because you could think, okay, forward men, never let it be said that Texans lag in the fight. So in his mind, he feels that the Texans have been accused of being
Yeah.
lagging, right? It reminds you a lot of Richard Garnett at Gettysburg,
Yes.
a lot of them. So for whatever reason, Granbury he's like many of these guys, he feels he's in this position, George Lamb Willard at Gettysburg. He's going to prove himself.
Yeah.
He's had issues in the past where he's felt disrespected. Today's going to be my day. Was it a death wish that he did what he did, or was it to reclaim the reputation of him and his Texans?
I think he cared about his men, but also he's put everything he has into this army. He's lost his wife. He's mourning her.
Right.
I think there is a bit of that, like, if I die, maybe I'll be back with her again. Who knows what it was, but I think it's also the pride, the whole,
Well,
and also it shows his leadership ability as well, because I think he took one look at that position and was like, no, the F way, are we going to be able to take that? So if I want my men to do it, I'm going to have to go forward with them.
yeah.
And
I think it's that. I don't personally. I don't think it's any more complicated that he felt his men were disrespected by somebody who was probably Hood.
Yeah.
Because Claiborne felt the same way.
Yeah.
He felt the same way. So he felt they had to prove themselves. So basically after the battle, the Texans talked about the confusion of this battle because smoke filled the air. Nobody could see anything. It was dark. They were firing at flashes of light from the Union muskets ahead, and Granbury is going to get to about 100 feet from reaching the center of the line at the Carter House, right? And after making it across that mile field, that smoky open field, and this is going to be the end of Hiram Granbury, okay? Yeah. At that moment, a cannonball is going to rip to the top of his skull, and he's going to cause him to cover his face with his hands and fall to his knees. The cannonball took the top part of his head off, and he died immediately, just 33 years old. The March to Franklin, and here's the interesting story about this too, is you read some of the soldier stories, and I probably should have said this before, but the March to Franklin apparently destroyed Granbury's boots, and he was almost barefoot walking. Yeah. And so a major Farmwalt is going to offer to let him wear his brand new boots into battle.
Wow.
And Farmwalt's going to said Granbury, he saw the boots and says, yes. He says, Granbury offered to break them in for me, was what he said. But he was wearing them when he was killed. Now the thing is, when these Texans, these beaten and distraught men, found him after the battle, this is according to a Lieutenant Mangum, who was right near Granbury when he fell, said his dead body was on his knees with his hands still clutching his face as if he was frozen in time.
Yeah.
That's how they found his body. And, again, 5 other Confederates are going to be killed or mortally wounded at this Battle of Franklin. But again, that you got to imagine the sight of that for his men.
Yeah. Like finding him there and he's just like frozen in time like that as he fell. Like that's got to be so creepy. And again, in doing the research for this episode, that this one paper I read recounts the Battle of Franklin in really, it's very detailed. The men going forward and Granbury with them. It's such a horrific battle. I can't even imagine the chaos and the confusion that it's just, it's what, 4.5, 5 hours long. And and Granbury's going to be laid out on the front porch or on the porch with, he's going to be with Claiborne and Othel Strahl. And who else is there? Adams as well.
They're going to be laid. They'll be laid on the porch. It'll be Claiborne, Adams, Othel Strahl. They'll be laying there on the porch of that Carnton house, yeah. Right? And they talked about the men. They saw their dead bodies. They were openly weeping as they saw all of them. And the Battle of Franklin fails. Schofield's going to get across. He's going to leave the Battle of Nashville. They're going to get beat again. Hood's going to fall back. That's going to be the end of it. But the thing about it is Granbury, after that, he's going to be buried near the Franklin battlefield at a place called McGavick Cemetery. And he'll be moved to a place called St. John's Episcopal Church about 30 miles away. And this is the same cemetery that Patrick Kleber was originally buried in, because he saw it and loved the church and thought,
he told Lucius Polk that he loved the church.
Yeah. He loved the church. And if he was killed, he'd love to be buried there.
Yeah.
That's what he said. And so they did it. And Granbury is going to end up being buried in this place for a long time, about 30 years. He's going to be there for 29 years until November 30th of 1893. When a friend of his from Texas, a guy named Kleber Van Zandt, no bigger Texan name than Kleber and Van Zandt, okay? Right. He's going to arrange to have his remains returned home to the town of Granbury, Texas, a small town southwest of Fort Worth that was founded in 1860 and, of course, was named after Hiram Granbury. And ironically, the town of Granbury is in Hood County, named after who?
Yeah. John Bell Hood.
John Bell Hood. So there you go. So he's reporting to Hood for eternity in his town. Right?
I don't know how Hiram Granbury would feel about that.
I don't know. But here's a fun fact though, for those who follow the John Wilkes Booth the John Wilkes Booth thing. The people who say that he survived Garrett's farm, Granbury, Texas, is the town that Booth, under the name of John St. Helen, had lived in for a while. He lived in a place called the Nutshell Eatery. Okay, which is now called a Square Cafe. I've been there, right? But Granbury's got a lot of weird history with that. But Granbury is buried today in Granbury Cemetery in Granbury, Texas. And when they moved his body from St. John's Episcopal, you know what they did? They moved the original gravestone, which is kind of rare.
Yeah.
The original gravestone. How'd they spell his last name?
With the 2 R's. Right.
Granbury.
Yeah.
Right. Now, eventually, it's been since replaced. It says Granbury today, but his original gravestone saying Granbury was transferred originally. And I can't think of too many situations in history where they did that.
No, I think they gave Claiborne a new one. And the other thing too, so his wife, when she died, Granbury could not afford a headstone for her, so she was buried in an unmarked grave. Recent research allowed people to find her grave, and she now has a marker that says Fanny Sims Granbury on it. But she's unfortunately not buried with her husband, which is sad. And I think that's because she doesn't have any descendants or something that can approve the moving of it. Which I'm like, just move her to let her, be with him.
The story of her body and her grave is fascinating. Like I said before, Fanny is mysterious her entire life. In her death, she's still mysterious. She's buried in a private unmarked plot paid for by a family called the Redmond family, which is likely a family friend. An unmarked grave in a place called Magnolia Cemetery in Mobile, Alabama, right? Poverty for different reasons. There was no money, like you said, to give her a gravestone. Yeah. She didn't have one. And she was missing for a century, gone. In June of 2001, not too long ago, Mary, think about it. A search began by a researcher named Mary Eddins Johnson. Mm-hmm. So she was hell-bent on finding her gravesite. And so in January 2002, her burial records were finally found by this Johnson. Johnson found several pieces of lost information that were lost to history, including the location of her grave, her death certificate, her obituary that was found at Auburn University, of all places. That's where she found this stuff, noting ovarian cancer as her cause of death. The problem, like you said, there were no descendants alive today to authorize Fanning's exhumation and reburial in Granbury, Texas with Hiram. So today, to this date, her body still remains in Mobile.
That is so sad.
But they finally gave her a headstone anyway.
Yeah.
So at least her body's there. But for the most part, sadly, it seems that Fanny, this is a woman who did everything possible to stay near Hiram in life, can't be with him in death because of red tape,
so
right?
Sad.
it's just a
I don't know.
sad
It's kind of
twist.
like I
The way
read that and I'm so frustrated. It's like, just like, oh my God, like, why do you need permission? Do you think someone's going to come along and get like, oh my God, you moved my great aunt or something? It's like, well,
I don't know.
let her be with her husband. Like,
I
I
don't know.
think that's what
It's tough
they
to
would have
say.
wanted.
No, but the thing about it though is Granbury's death had a big impact. It had a big impact to his Masonic lodge in Waco too.
Yeah.
It, April 8th of 1865, which is right around the time of Appomattox, Mary, right around that same time, right?
Yeah.
Granbury's Masonic Lodge, number 92 in Texas. I look up their minutes, and they actually had information entered into their official minutes about Hiram Granbury.
Wow.
And Hiram Granbury at that point had the position of senior warden, which
Whoa.
basically means he was next in line to the master of the lodge. He was next in line.
Wow.
The minutes of April 8th, 1865, in the Masonic Lodge number 92, this is what they wrote. Whereas at the Battle of Franklin, Tennessee, it pleased the supreme ruler of the universe to remove from us by death our esteemed and worthy brother, General Hiram Bronson Granbury. Resolved by the death of our brother, the country in its hour of peril has to lament one of its ablest defenders, society, one of its brightest ornaments, this lodge, one of the most esteemed and worthy brothers in Freemasonry, one of its most zealous and worthy sons.
Wow.
That's what that was read in the lodge of April 18th, 1865. So again, it goes back to what? That leadership ability,
Yeah.
how much impact this guy had, and how his untimely death at age 33 is one of the great what ifs for Reconstruction. He's somebody who, especially in Texas, would have been very instrumental. But again, we'll never know. We'll never know.
No, it's a lot like Claiborne, and he was good friends with Claiborne. He was close. All of them in that, the Claiborne's division. You had was it Lowry, um, Lucius Polk, Granbury, all of
I mean,
them. Like,
you had a tough group of guys, and they were fighters. But he again he rose up, and I think he's somebody who I think people know who he is tangentially anyway. But when you really get into the weeds and look at this guy, you realize a pained soul, someone who carried grief throughout the war and died a real tragic death.
yeah.
And really, we said before, Franklin is very unnecessary. So I think it's great to talk about him. There's not a lot of people who talk about Hiram Granbury, but
No.
I think he's someone who's important to study because again it adds a face, it adds a person to this picture. And the picture that we mentioned is a sad picture because when you look at that picture, he made this picture because he wanted his wife to have it when she died because he wasn't going to be there. That's the genesis of this picture. And so when you see it, the one with the big crazy hair, that's why he took the picture
That
for
is
her. It wasn't
so
some.
sad.
So it's sad. It's sad. So
Yeah, but it's great
anyway,
to
so
tell his story because, north or south, these guys are human. Um, they have lives. I mean, he had a wife, um, who clearly they loved each other a lot. I think they were each other's best friends, just from what I've read about them. She's going to war with him, like John Brown Gordon's wife went to war with him. She's crossing icy rivers for him, and I think at the end of the day, like he went back after she died and he just was like, I have to fight because that's what she would have wanted me to do. I think she really encouraged, she kind of encouraged the whole, like, yeah, you have to keep going sort of thing. And that's all he had was his men in the 7th Texas, and what became, beyond that, obviously. But he's a great leader. He has a lot of leadership skills that, leading his men at Franklin, like that's baller.
it's tough. It's tough.
Like, jeez,
Mm-hmm.
that's baller right there. But I'm
It is.
really glad we did an episode about him because he is one of those. He's one of those stories that just does not get talked about enough, and he's
Nope.
such a fascinating story.
It is. So this is where I usually ask you what's next for us, right? So so we'll have to figure something out.
Our
Some
next
stuff
episode
cooking.
will probably be in 2024, honestly,
It will
because
be.
we have Christmas coming up and all that. But yeah, we will be announcing book club stuff soon. Hopefully, we will be hopefully another roundtable where we can hang out and stuff with y'all. But yeah, thank you for all of your support. These 120 episodes. Thank you, Darren, for being an amazing co-host.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll have it's a great thing to do. It's fun. There's a lot of other history going on, Mary. Tomorrow is a 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, where 116 of Boston's bravest Freemasons dumped the King's Tea into the salty sea. So we're going to go ahead and participate in that tomorrow as part of my lodge. We're going to have some fun doing that. So we will look forward to that. But again, everybody listen, we appreciate your support. Have a great holiday. Enjoy. Hopefully you have a lot of time with your family. I know it's a tough time for a lot of people, but find the joy any way you can, whatever it happens to be. People are always supported, and it's great to be able to do this with you, Mary. So off we go. So again, we appreciate it. So off we go, guys. Have a great holiday. Have a great weekend, and we don't forget the YouTube live tomorrow, Mary. We can do that, and then we are off to Gettysburg for a couple of weeks ourselves. So we'll have some fun
hopefully
doing
we'll,
that.
We'll probably, like I said, we're doing our YouTube live stream tomorrow, but we'll try and do one while we're in Gettysburg as well, and we will be back sometime in January, hopefully early January, with probably a battle episode. I think we need to get back to some battles.
Find something fun to do. Yep. All right. Any final words from you, Fincheru?
Thank you for bringing it as always. And thank you again to all our listeners. Y'all are awesome.
Don't forget, there's no basement in the Alamo.
Anyway, we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Peace out, everybody. Bye. Bye.